morning, everybody. I'd like to call, there, it's official. The Abolition Hall Steering Committee meeting, May 12th, beginning around 7 p.m., called to order. We do have one of our members, Darren Sudman, joining virtually. Deb was not able to make it tonight, and then the rest of the committee is here. First thing is approval of minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes?
Have.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Perfect, approved. And then Abolition Hall updates. John, would you like to?
Do you guys want to give a little intro? What?
That would be awesome.
Sure. We hired Rockwell Associates. John Osbach is our arborist for the township to go down and do a tree assessment at this site on the Corson Tract where Abolition Hall is located. John went out there February into March, yep. February into March, and provided a lengthy, detailed report. So we asked John to come in here to kind of explain that whole report to everyone and get an idea. John has been in front of Shade Tree and
Board of Supervisors.
Board at the workshop.
Workshop.
Right? Yeah, okay. So
yes.
He's doing his rounds. So.
Absolutely.
Welcome, John.
Thank you. So again, my name is John Housekeeping. For people that don't know me, I am your consulting arborist and forester. Was it last week we met with the board or the week prior? For the workshop.
May 1st.
May 1st for the workshop.
Yep.
A little bit about my firm. We are a consulting firm. We're an unbiased. We don't actually do any of the work. So the township hired my firm to come in and perform over an overview of your subject woodlands, your peripheral trees within the actual barn setting, and your landscape trees. And our objectives were threefold. Our first thing was to review the safety and wellness of anybody or anything within the vicinity of the trees in the peripheral that runs along Butler and Germantown Pike, that back up to the businesses on Germantown Pike. The farmhouse itself, the existing features, which are some of your stone walls, structures within the garden, and obviously adjacent neighbors within the vicinity of the large trees. So we performed a risk association, and we put a priority rating for each one of those trees. Within that structure, there is about 134 trees that are 3 inches or greater. Out of those 134, there is 202 that are going to be removed, okay? And some of them are small, some of them are ash, some of them are large dead walnut trees. There's a lot of variables within the risk association with these trees. And again, safety and wellness was our first and foremost, objective of this property. Second, we went into looking at the invasive management. So within the ag fields and the woodland plots within the community, there's about a 95% understory invasive makeup, which is Armor honeysuckle, multiflora rose. These vines and plants are choking out all the native trees. The wildlife benefits out there are totally diminished because of the invasive structure. And it's also disrupting the regeneration of any native trees. So like our oaks, our maples, our tule poplars, there's nothing regenerating out there. Like I said, 95% of the plain ground plants are all invasive. And then thirdly, our goal was to provide a woodland management to bring the property back to parity. So that's removing the monoculture. So if people that were out on the site with me can see clearly that the site is engulfed with black walnut, which is a monoculture out there. We do have a lot of ash. I think 52 ash are within the woodlands. And we have a lot of maples, Norway maples that are invasive. So we need to create a very diverse palette of trees. Can we pull the species list up?
Right here?
No, a little bit. Yeah, that's good right there. So if you can see on here, you'll see that the black walnut make up 28.4% of the palette makeup. Norway maple, which is very prolific and invasive, makes up 15.7%. Hackberry, which is a native tree, we're trying to introduce more of those, is 14%. And then elm, and a lot of these are slippery elm. They're not the American elm, and they make up 8.2%. So you can see there that we have a very low diverse palette. We should have no more than 10% of one species. So you can see we have a very high monoculture. So we're going to introduce, and if you go down, Craig, a little bit on the screen. Keep going. Down to the actual tree list.
Better?
Nope, keep going. There we go. So you can see here, we provided, and these are just some basic choices. We're trying to get a really diverse palette that provides not only wildlife benefits, but we're looking at longevity, trees that don't require a lot of maintenance. Our goal is to go into the 14 plots. So within that ag fields, there's 14 separate little woodland plots. We're going to go inside, reduce with both chemical and mechanical means, get rid of all the invasives. We're going to come in and mow all those invasives out once the mortality sets in. We're going to cull out and open up light through shelter wood cutting to allow seed crop trees. Some of these areas we're going to actually put deer inclusion fence around, which will help keep the the white-tailed deer population, because you have a very prolific deer population out there. And without some proactive measures, you're never going to get good regeneration. We're proposing over 1,000 trees to be planted within these woodland plots. And they'll protect it with tubes, the deer guards, and then the fencing that'll go around them. Questions up to now?
How much does it cost to plant a tube?
So a tube tree, which is about a 4 to 5 foot tree with a tube, wholesale cost is going to cost us anywhere from $40 to $50 for the purchase, and then usually it's 2.1 to 2.2 for the actual planting, if we're subbing this work out to a contractor.
Okay.
Yep. So a lot of these areas within the woodland plots, Craig recently had some staff go out and gather branches that have fallen over the years, storm damage related, dead ash trees, and they actually piled them into brush piles, per se, within these wooded plots. And Craig said, when we were first out there, hey, we got to get these cleaned up. I said, absolutely not. These things are called brush walls, and they're actually very important not only for mammal habitat, but also they help protect the seedlings. So white-tailed deer are very lazy. They don't like to climb over things to get food. So you plant these whips within these brush piles, and the deer won't even mess with them. So it's a very important tool. Yep. So again, this is a very high level. This is a very complex project. It's going to need a lot of support. First and foremost, as Craig probably pointed out, we have to cull all the hazard trees, the trees within the barn area that could potentially fall onto the infrastructure, trees that could fall to our adjacent neighbors along Germantown Pike, and then what really worries me is the trees along Butler Pike that are really significant hazards. And they've all been painted and denoted. Craig and Sam have done a great job cataloging them through my report, and I believe Craig has already has had conversation with Public Works and about going out to bid and getting that mitigated. After that part is done, we need to really step it up in terms of looking at how we're going to manage the invasive infrastructure. It's going to be very costly. It's going to take a lot of time and effort, a lot of buy-in from people. But once that part has been rectified, it's a clean slate to really have a good educational piece of ground where it can be, utilized as a learning center. I think, we could be the pilot for all the other townships around. There's not many townships doing these woodland mitigation projects. I think it's something that could really bring this property, what I would call as back to parity, what it used to look like. Keep the ag fields in place, maybe utilize them for some sort of nursery, I know we have partners within the township that can maybe come and plant some trees that can be utilized within the township parks as we need them. Maybe, you know, an outside contractor can plant some trees, and maybe we can gain some capital off of it. Again, it's a clean slate. It just needs a lot of strategic approach to manage this.
Can we get utility companies to deal with any of the trees along the roads with utility line stuff?
So if you asked me that question 5 years ago, yes. They have a new practice where they pretty much, unless they're going to be improving their infrastructure, their utility infrastructure, vegetation management along their utility interface is really non-existent anymore. They're not going to come, you know, they'd rather just come and do it when they're going to do their mitigation.
Okay.
Questions up to now?
Board?
My question is like, what is a natural, feasible, financial, and safety first step in this? Like, clearly, the trees that are at risk for hazard for falling, I think there are a couple of heritage trees there.
That is correct.
Those, you know, safety first,
Sure.
but, you know, that would be first, and then what's the cost? And
Yep.
part of the money can come from open space funds, correct?
Most of the money can come from open space for the trees outside. Well, there's no trees inside, but yeah.
Correct. So yes, I mean, your first step, Lauren, that's a great question, is obviously we got to reduce liability, getting rid of, especially along Butler Pike, which really makes me nervous. But again, also around the barn structure itself, and you know the features within the barn. I mean, there's one Norway maple that's lifting up the wall, and if that was left to continue to grow, I mean, you could end up collapsing that wall, which you'd never be able to repair it back to its original intent, which is, to me, we have a standard of care to provide for that property. And removing hazards and things that could upset infrastructure are very critical.
Could we chip these trees to create a walking trail around the perimeter?
So yeah, so the resource of the wood chips is going to be used for a lot of different avenues. One, it's going to help suppress the invasives. So anything that's chipped, so if there's trees going to be removed, they'll be stockpiled. Trees in the woodland plots, as they're chipped, they'll be blown right back into the woodland areas. They're going to help just with improving the soil quality, but also suppressing invasive structure that's coming back up through. But yes, I mean, you can definitely use them as a wood chip.
The bigger stuff gets taken away in the log truck?
So yes, logs and stuff like that will be removed. Right now, some of these companies can chip up to 24 inches. And other than a few hazardous trees that we have that are heritage, you know, their wood isn't really viable anyways. So they're going to probably just take that back for firewood processing, but everything else is going to be pretty much chipped on site.
How much do you expect this to cost?
So that is one of the objectives Craig and I and Sam are working on, especially for the hazards right now. There's a lot of variables with the hazards because you do have a utility there, you're going to have a road shut down, you're going to have flagger force. So, you know, anywhere from, for the hazard trees, I'd say anywhere from 30 to 40,000 for the hazard trees, okay, give or take. The woodland management, you know, costs are all over the place. I'd rather get a good subjective bid to bring to your attention, and then we can go from there to really, because I want to have it broken down by each task. So invasive removal, invasive spraying, herbicide treatments, removal of the monoculture invasive trees, and really give you a good menu of what these costs look like. Because there's also a tag associated with this for maintenance going forward.
John, what about the hazard risk for fire with those bundles?
So, you know, you're thinking of California and different areas. You know, we have very moist conditions. The chance of fire, you don't read about fires within Pennsylvania, especially southeastern Pennsylvania. We don't have enough fuel wood out there to support a fire, okay? And these little brush walls are nothing to be nervous about. the areas where people have these large fires, such as like the Pine Barrens, is they have years and years of debris building up, and there has been no management of opening up the woodland structure, which we're proposing to do here, and they just have so much deadfall there. So our deadfall, we're going to leave snags for wildlife benefit, but we're not leaving the branch structure. We're not leaving any high-volume fuel wood that could cause a fire.
As you stated, this is an enormous project, so I'm assuming that it's going to be done in stages, like you said, addressing hazards.
Correct.
Trees first, and then we'll move on to the next one. So throughout those stages, would the property be closed? Like, obviously, everything along Butler Pike, that would have to be blocked off, diverting traffic, really, to handle those. Is it something where the property would be closed to the public during these stages?
I believe so, especially for the hazard section of the project. I believe when we start getting into invasive control, just because there will be a herbicide label with that program, we would close it off. And after the invasives are chipped and removed, I believe that's a time where people can come in and start seeing the progress. We'd really like to invite people in to start seeing, the fruits of our labor, per se. And, we're probably bringing a lot of partners to come in and try to gain some momentum. Outside contractors, we have a local nonprofit tree company here that we maybe get involved with. So that's the educational piece. So, and then again, it's evolving. Woodland structure and woodland management is very much evolving. So it's not a one and done.
Right.
Greg?
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Darren.
Any of these trees really old? Like, were they around during abolition?
I think there's one walnut that might be, in the $150, $160 range of years. Other than that, it's secondary succession, because that was an ag field, and a lot of that stuff was pioneer and then turned successional, and never really got out of that scheme because of the invasive infrastructure. But I don't think there's any trees that were standing, within the foundation of the barn at that time. Everything out in the
Okay.
ag fields is all young, so.
Okay, and then if we remove, I think, over 300 trees on the property, how much time will that process take, and how drastically different will the landscape look? Because that seems like a really high number.
Yep.
And I've never been a part of something like that.
That's a great question. So we will do this in phases so that we do not denude the site. And I believe cost will also control our priority ratings as well. I'm looking at this as a 5 to 7 year plan based on some other projects I've been involved in. So at no time will we be, raping the land of its trees or denuding the site where it looks like we're developing, toll homes for sure. Absolutely not.
Okay.
Questions?
Has any of this work gone out to bid yet?
No.
No. What we would do here is, after the presentation is done, ask the board for a recommendation to go to the Board of Supervisors and go out to bid.
John, how much the must-haves, how big of a scope of work is like the must-haves?
So the must-haves are obviously risk-related trees first and foremost. Forget about Abolition Hall, we do that everywhere. Building, road corridor, adjacent neighbors, businesses off of Germantown, and then further up the single dwellings. That's first and foremost. Second is gaining some traction on the invasives. So if you look very closely, if you walk the site, you'll start to see that, we do mow the fields there currently, the Public Works does, but the invasives are starting to encroach out to those areas, so that if we don't manage this within at least 5 to 7 years, we're going to start seeing, duplicates of those invasives starting to stretch out to areas where they shouldn't be.
So the scope around the buildings, the roads, the neighbors, how big of how many trees, how much money are we talking about?
So on phase one, priority one, there's a total of 20 trees that need to come down on priority one. And I gave that figure just because, Craig needs to manage this through a budget. So priority one, there's priority one, 20 trees, priority two, 36, priority three, 30 trees, priority four, 13 trees, priority five, 3 trees. That's what needs to come out immediately.
Okay. So priority one needs to come out immediately.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. But with that being said, if the contractors there are already mobilized, we're going to see what that cost ratio is to have them, pull the trigger on everything and see what kind of cost savings we would get. And I believe Craig would report back to the board. So if he's already there, has a crane set up, has the power shut off, or has the power sleeve, they put those orange sleeves on the power, it might make sense for him to do a little bit more so that we get that cost savings. And we're going to ask that question. I will be meeting the contractors out there. And again, I want to try to, get the best bang for our budget and get as much done as we can at one shot.
Who are the contractors being considered?
That has not been discussed yet. I mean, I know you guys use, what's the gentleman's name?
Jolly Green Giant.
We
Is it Moore?
Danny Moore is one of them, but
Yep.
there's 3 or 4 that we use on a
Yep.
rotation base, so.
But I believe, with the hazards, that's an emergency project. I think with some of this other work, it's going to have to go on pen bid, which is a municipal, it's a law. I mean, you have to go on pen bid, anything over, $25,000?
Yeah. I think we would do pen bid on all of it.
Okay,
At
got
this
it.
point. We can
Got
do
it.
it within the 30-day period or 45 days, and
Correct.
still get good.
And the problem with that, to answer your question, is, and I just seen it recently in another township, is people from Alabama who don't have a lot of work can bid on this project and come up here and do this. And as long as they have the insurance requirements, you can't turn them away,
That happens a lot.
which sometimes gets scary. But with that being said, we're going to be managing the project, so
Mandatory site walk?
absolutely. We'll do everything we can to deter those folks, but it does happen. I mean, it just happened in Cheltenham Township, so, it's concerning, but that's how pen bid is worked.
Let me take some questions.
And you can't do bid breaking, so, that's illegal as well.
Well, according to this, there's 5 phases.
Correct.
So that, if we were to do it phase by phase by phase, that wouldn't necessarily be bid breaking, right? Because these are all different priorities, different scopes over a 5 to 7 year plan.
You would think, I think that would be a question for the solicitor. I've heard in the past that if it's one project, one ultimate goal, and you break it out over different contractors and different cost structures, it's bid breaking. That's what I've been told, but I'm not an attorney, so.
Yeah, it's been determined
Huh?
differently. Different solicitors look at this differently.
Yeah, you just gotta be careful.
I mean, this is one project that,
Absolutely, yeah.
Do we have any public questions, comments?
Questions or comments?
Both.
Come on.
Identify myself, I guess, Deborah Harris.
We're used to that.
No, thank you. Just a reminder that we purchased this property with open space funds, and that by law, we can expend 25% of annual open space revenue for the maintenance and improvement of open space properties. Where land is purchased for active or passive recreation, master site plans can be prepared for the needed facilities, site improvements, park management, equipment, and programs, and the employees, contractors, or staff to do these things. We can do things like we were talking about here where with the cutting the trees, but also the replanting, building trails, facilities, a restroom, a contract to maintain that restroom. All these sorts of things are eligible under open space funding. We can do an environmental assessment, which is one of the things recommended with property purchase with open space funds, is to do an environmental site assessment. But in the short run, no environmental site assessment would not approve of hazard trees and invasive species removal. So in no way would that request for an environmental site assessment stop this kind of work, because this is obviously, something that would be done. We, the township, everyone here, we need to be stewards of this land. We've acquired this money with open space funds, and we can improve it and maintain it with open space funds. For those who don't know, the Open Space Committee back last fall sent a memo to the Board of Supervisors expressing their support in shifting to this 25% for open space land management. They agree that we have acquired land and now we need to be stewards of that land. We can develop plans for what we want, restoring our forests, eventually restoring, what do we want to do with these fields? We want to make meadows. We have wetlands. There are 3 identified wetlands on site. We can improve those. We can build trails. We can hire staff and contractors to do this work. We can also hire staff to do programming. Abolition Hall is an important place, all sorts of historical or environmental things that we can do. We as a township and a Board of Supervisors should commit to putting 25% of our open space tax revenue into the maintenance fund and spending it for these sorts of projects. And this can be a great first start and an example of what all of our open space land should look like. Also would recommend, and I'll talk to the Board of Supervisors, that if we can do a look back, not only should we do 25% with our future year's revenues, if we can do a look back, I don't think we've put money in maintenance since like 2016. If we can grab those 25% forward, that's a nice chunk of change for us to do the kind of work that we should do as stewards of this land. And then for the specifics of this site, if we go ahead with things like tree planting and tubes, our staff here is really worked to their edge. You know, they don't have a lot of free time. Maintaining tubes, carrying around them, keeping the invasives off of them. This is a great time to hire a contractor or staff, however one wants to do this, but we should hire people to do this. I think we would really stress our staff, and it would affect the care of the trees. If we're going to pay to plant trees, we should pay to maintain these trees. So this is a great use of open space fund to hire a contractor or staff, depending how you want to do this, to maintain these trees, and to make sure that they thrive and get going. Why spend the effort to plant and make a beautiful palette of native trees, thank you for the selection of the beautiful trees, without caring for them. So please, let us be better stewards of our land and really restore it to its native condition, support native wildlife, native species. And specifically, John, thank you for leaving the snags. They are an important wildlife habitat as well. But I urge everyone to urge our Board of Supervisors and all of us, let's start spending this money to be stewards of the lands that we have purchased. Thank you.
John, what's a snag?
So a snag is a tree that died or is being condemned for some reason, whether it's hazardous, invasive, whatever it might be. You remove all the branch structure, leave the log standing, and birds and different insects and mammals use the cavities for homes and feeding. So it's just a good ecological benefit for woodland structure. And it saves you money by not removing logs and paying to have them hauled off. So it's value.
And it's cut low enough that if it did fall,
that is correct, yeah. So they're usually left anywhere from 15 to 20 feet. Yeah.
I have another question as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm looking at a page that lists a bunch of species. It says all species 134.
Yes, correct.
And then removals 102.
Yep.
So does that mean that there's 134 trees on the property and we're proposing to remove 102 of them?
No, absolutely not. So the 134 species, they're tag numbers. So sometimes there's 5 trees in one tag.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
Correct. Absolutely not. And again, these are only trees that are to remain. They didn't have any issues, tribulations, weren't invasive. They weren't even cataloged.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Good.
Good evening, Sidell Zove, Harts Ridge Road. A couple of follow-up points to put a few numbers to Deb's comments about tapping the open space maintenance reserve. I made these comments before the Board of Supervisors last Thursday, and I thought I would just reiterate them here, and that is that the open space maintenance reserve has about $1.4 million in it right now. But had the township been moving 25% of the revenue annually from inception into that fund, it would have about $9 million in it right now. which is a significant sum. Probably more than enough.
True. Yeah, I would say so. Absolutely.
Now, the open space fund only stands at about $9 million right now, so you don't want to tap that 25% since inception and move it into the reserve, because then you'd have no funds available for acquisition, and the township clearly wants to be in a position where it can move quickly should there be an opportunity to acquire open space. But certainly, that 1.4 million can be increased substantially as needed. And I think it would be prudent to get those bids, get a sense of the parameters of the requirements for expenditure to pursue the 5-year plan, and then make a decision about how much to move from the general fund of the open space fund into the maintenance reserve. That's one point. Second point, John, you talked about the scariness of having people from Alabama or anywhere else come up here and do work. And Dana, I want to address this specifically to you. We have an important cultural landscape here. And what we don't want is for a huge crew to come in with gigantic machines and ignore the stone pillars, the concrete gazebo, the little bits of sculpture here and there, stone walls all over the place. There's an important cultural landscape that really needs to be inventoried. And I'm glad to see architect here tonight, because perhaps that's something that she can begin to work on. It needs to be inventoried, and it needs to be clearly marked, and it needs to be protected at any point in which there is machinery on this site. And I know you appreciate that.
Absolutely, yes.
And just as a reminder, this homestead is on the National Register, and the Plymouth Meeting Historic District was Pennsylvania's first National Register district. I believe it was, now I'm not sure about the date, but it's the first one in Pennsylvania. So we need to respect that.
Excuse me, Sidel.
Yeah.
Do you think that the inventory that you just spoke about is a condition precedent to massive tree work? Like, obviously there's like emergency stuff that we kind of have to move on, but do you think that inventory is something that's also urgent?
I think it's urgent, but it depends on the nature of the machinery that's brought in and where. Now, if you're and actually the best person to speak to this would be Roy Wilson, who lived at the property from the 1980s until a few years ago. I walk there regularly, and most of what I have observed as cultural landscape features, important features, improvements, let's say, that man-made, are around the buildings, the historic buildings. I haven't seen anything in the fields, but then it's impossible to see everything in the fields because of all the invasive growth there. So, perhaps the area in and around the sort of immediate yard space of the historic buildings, that really does need a cultural landscape, whatever the proper term would be, inventory and protection. But I would imagine that elsewhere, like along the Butler Pike edge and certainly into the fields, I don't think that there's anything back in there. But as I say, Roy Wilson can speak in a more informed way to that.
So Craig brought that up the first meeting we had on site. He said, within the structures with the walls and the little pond thing and the work gardens and the little
gazebo,
the pergola, that we would need to have some sort of inspector, which would be either somebody from my firm or Gilmore out there, making sure. And I think a lot of that work will be done with our local guy, maybe the stuff around the barn, and then bid out the Butler Pike stuff, which is a little less precarious in terms of doing damage. Damage would be onto the utility lines, and that would be on the contractor. In terms of the big project, do that Penn did, they have to post a bond, which secures money so that they damage, whether it's the infrastructure or even other trees, they're held accountable for that through the final inspection.
I mean, damage is one thing, but knowing what's there, knowing,
I was going to say, I appreciate the bond, but I understand what she's saying too. Exactly. If you cut something down, it's not going to come back. And when it's near the buildings, yeah, that's a priority of care.
Build some sort of temp structures to make sure that stuff's protected. That'll be on the contractor as well.
And one other point I just want to make about the snags. My husband and I, Steve Kaufman and I, we have a fairly large yard, and we've been there for pushing 30 years now. And when we remove trees, we leave snags. And I have to tell you that the array of birds, woodpeckers, pileated woodpeckers, downies, and haries that enjoy those snags is wonderful. It's a delight to see. Finally, with regard to the wetlands, John did note previously when he presented to the Board of Supervisors at the workshop meeting, I think that was.
Correct.
Yeah. That there will be no work going on, no tree removal going on in the wetlands at this point.
That is correct.
But there are 3 wetlands.
Yep.
One is very close to Butler Pike.
Yep.
And he also added that there should be a 100-foot buffer protecting those wetlands. So that's another issue that we want to make sure if there's heavy equipment moving around on the site, that they don't all of a sudden willy-nilly take the shortest route straight through the wetland to get to the next tree.
Yep.
And those wetlands, they're not just wet land. Those are wetlands that meet the Army Corps of Engineers requirements for delineation. They were very carefully investigated. The nature of the soil, the nature of the plants there all meet the requirements for designation as a wetland. Thank you.
Can I ask John a question?
Yeah.
Sure, Dan.
Talking about outside contractors, I know that you as our arborist have a right to have local companies that you've dealt with that have been poor in their work or violate contract. You're allowed to put them on a no list and they can't win a contract based upon your professional assessment that they did not meet your professional standards.
So what I was told at another township, being Radnor, that because they have a lot of tree work that goes out to bid, that unless there was a lawsuit between the contractor and the township, you cannot say no if they meet the requirements, be a prevailing wage, because it's a prevailing wage job, and the insurance requirement, which I forget what it actually is, but as long as they meet them, you cannot discriminate.
I was told different I took the forestry class at Penn State, and they were actually it was forestry management for.
Correct.
Yeah, and they were more specific that, you have a right to just say their work's not good, like they top a tree. That's not professional, and therefore you can say you can never get a contract to top a tree here.
You're
or
correct.
to maintain a tree.
You're absolutely right, but this is for a pen bid. This is over a certain amount of money.
That's going to change our rules? Okay.
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay, because I was wondering if you had some
Correct.
ability to talk to
Absolutely.
people back in this Alabama guy's home district.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so we can at least do our best. And then I guess a very tightly written contract, as Sidel was
Absolutely.
saying about but I know you were on that with the
Such as
wetlands and
Edmund
such.
said, having a site walk. People from somewhere outside the area are not going to come up for a Sunday walkthrough, which I'll
No.
make
But
on a Sunday morning at 8 o'clock, so.
But a nice tight contract with very specific language and said,
Yeah.
hey, cut our trees for us. But I'm sure you won't do, but just,
Absolutely, yeah.
Hi.
Diane Boyle, Plymouth Meeting. Are there any documents, maybe you're more familiar, that indicate, excuse me, where a tree might have been at the time? Or any letters or plans that someone made that said, okay, an oak tree is supposed to go here, or a painting that's, there's where they put that,
That's a really good question. I don't personally know. I know for the estate that I'm the director of, we do have historic blueprints from the early 1900s that we do abide by. So if those are in existence, certainly if a tree came down already, or we had a William Penn oak that was struck by lightning. We know exactly where it was and decide whether we're going to replant the same thing in its
I
place.
just think it would be nice to put back what
Sure.
was there.
Absolutely.
And if you go on to historicalimagery.com, you can actually go back quite a ways and actually see the site. And I went back a little bit. I mean, it had the ag fields. But remember, this was ag-based, so there was a lot less bigger trees, hence why we have such a pioneer species of invasives. But around the barn center itself, it appears that it was a heavy walnut crop, so.
Well, I'm just wondering, you know.
Sure, no, absolutely, great question.
If there's a painting that had a certain tree in a certain place, and we know
Sure.
that that belonged there, well, let's put one back.
Sure.
Okay.
So John, if we start planting a bunch of trees, it's going to help with the invasive growth?
So, give you the high level. We have to manage the invasives first, eradicate those, and then continue to maintain them. In the interim between the first round of management, we start to plant. Shade trees smother out invasives, okay? That's why as time goes on, if you're not planting or managing through shelter wood cutting to release, seed crop trees, the invasives just take over, there's nothing regenerating. So our job is to get the slate started, and then we got to manage it going forward to make sure we don't get into this situation where we're now. However, that first initial will really start bringing that property back to parity in terms of woodlands, and really give us a good starting point to manage accordingly. But right now, we are at a point where we are totally consumed by invasives, and nothing can be planted until we manage those. And that's going to be based on these bids that come back, the money that we're going to allocate towards this, how we're going to prioritize it. So right now, we don't have those priority ratings yet until we know what the township is going to spend in terms of management.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
It's funny, you just read my mind. I was going to suggest a motion edit as you see fit to, at least for phase 1, for the removal of initial pen bid to at least begin this process.
Sure.
To go to the Board of Supervisors.
So, yeah, it sounds, and anyone sitting here, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like no one is overly concerned that this process is going to degrade the property. So my feeling is that I think between John and Craig and the Board of Supervisors, we should just make a recommendation that we support what John is doing, and that Craig and John work to fulfill what we talked about today. That way they have discretion to do what they need to do, and we're not limiting that. I mean, however they choose to do it is, I think, in their best discretion.
Darren, any questions?
Nope.
Okay. All in favor of a...
You have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry, Roy?
Roy Wilson, we used to live on the property. I heard his presentation at the Board of Supervisors meeting. In terms of any architectural elements on the property that ought to be taken into account, as you said, there's very few in the fields. A couple of things I did want to mention. There are some fence posts in those days. In the old days, along Butler Pike, there's a few out in the fields. They put concrete posts in, and the rails will go into that. Most of them are trash. A lot of them are falling apart, or they're bending over, but there are a few there. You see them. The things that are important, I think, as I mentioned at the Board of Supervisors meeting, the one tree, which I think you're going to take down between the Hovenden House and the next door office building there. That's where the root cellar is. It's right below it.
Yep.
It's going to be really hard to set up any kind of equipment.
Yep.
You could actually go into the root cellar. I mean, it's a big root cellar with a corbelled ceiling. It's gigantic. And but at the end of it, there's a hole. And the reason there's a hole, at one time there was a well there. And that's how you drop your water into the well to bring it up and whatnot. And that's just covered right now with a fiberglass plate. And it is basically adjacent to the tree. So when that tree comes out, it's going to be really difficult.
No stump removal. So my staff did make note that tree will be removed from afar, meaning using a crane. So that's how these tree guys do this work these days. There's not much climbing going on. And that tree will only be cut flush with the ground. There'll be no stump grind or anything to disrupt that feature
What about the equipment though? Because I know, like, what she said, the structure underneath, like, my property has a tunnel and we can't
We're
put
not
anything
We're not
over
going to
it.
be anywhere near it. So
Okay.
the crane will, part of when I meet with the folks, whoever's bidding the job is, they got to grab a stick, that's what it's called, when you have a crane, and you grab that piece, and then it get moved away from
Gotcha.
the obstruction, so.
Okay.
Yep.
Interestingly enough, when the next door where the office complex is, they took a gigantic tree down. I think, I don't know if it was
That was a pin oak, big pin oak, I believe.
I thought it was a walnut, but it could have been a pin oak. Anyway, they had a giant crane there to do that. I mean, a big one, in flatbed trucks. But the one difference between our property and them is we don't have any access.
Right.
There's not really any way to get most of this equipment in because of the walkways, which are, 1800s walkways, and the little walls there and whatnot. That's pretty much everywhere. There was a couple pits actually in the side yard. Not clear what they are, but you can't drive over top of them either. So access is going to be a problem. Maybe even from his side, work out something with a neighbor that they can come in from his side because that's how they did their tree. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention is the gazebo. Before you cut the tree down, you might want to have a structural architect or somebody look at the gazebo. It is in bad condition. It's concrete. I think it was put in around 1900. A photograph of the mother and daughter standing in front of it when it was new. It doesn't look anything like it does now. At that time, it was nice, clean, gray concrete. Now it's mostly, you see the pebbles, all the gravel from underneath. All the surface stuff is gone. The way you do concrete is you have the tendons are on the bottom, and they give concrete its strength. This concrete has no tensile strength, so the tendons on the bottom of concrete will keep it from collapsing. It's not the thickness of the concrete. Those things are showing, and a lot of them are actually broken. So if you just walk up to it and look up, you'll see what I mean. There's a lot of steel right at the bottom of that gazebo, which is either showing rotted or broken. And what that means is there's very little structural stability in a couple of those pieces. The two going this way are pretty good. The two going this way aren't. And if a branch comes down and hits it, most likely it's just going to take it out. So certainly I could be careful, but maybe it's something you'll take a look at first and decide whether you want to keep it or not.
Thanks for the added pressure, my friend.
But I think these are really great points to the earlier point about the importance of the group coming in to do the work.
Yeah.
They have to be thoroughly vetted to be aware of how to approach the sensitivity of.
I think, my opinion is, and Craig, we can talk, another day about it. I think we need to get somebody that's used to working within the township just to take care of the high impact trees around the barn. Some that we have a relationship with that will go the extra mile and then bid out the remaining work. Use this as like maybe an emergency, then we'll figure something out.
Would you be the person overseeing it?
Either myself or one of my staff members. Most likely anything within the barn, I'd be there because, I'm good at throwing people off properties at first, so.
The last one I wanted to mention before I sit down here, because I know he talked about the Board of Supervisors meeting, and you're going to cut it down. There's a tree right as you leave the Abolition Hall gate yard, in the courtyard, and you head out toward the fields. If you've ever been to Scotland, the standing stones of Stennis, have you ever heard of them? In Scotland, they have a lot of standing stones. There's two giant stones standing there with the gate posts for this giant fence that opens, and they still have some of the hardware on them. Those I consider very valuable.
Sure.
And this tree you're going to take down is right next to it.
Yeah.
So that's going to be.
So for those areas around the barn, they're going to have to, the egress is going to be at the driveway. My objective for the entire project, the woodland management's going to come off of Butler. We'll make some sort of skid trail that comes off of Butler that does not impact any large viable trees to remain. And that'll be the egress for the remaining project.
Not through the wetland.
No.
Well, in terms of the wetlands, I want to make a comment since you brought it up. The one near Marple Lane, you can call that whatever you want. The wetland along, as you describe it, along Butler Pike, that is a ditch. The ditch was created, it used to be a lot worse when the neighboring office complex, all their water came on their property, all of it. And it all ran across the driveway, down the field, down that field, and down to the end of the property, right along Butler Pike, where the so-called wetland was delineated by the Army Corps of Engineers later, when she came. They put a bunch of tags. It's like a slot like the size of this table that runs down right along the grass area I used to mow in the fields, and there's some trees there. You can call it a wetland if you want, but it really is a ditch, which under wetlands is not a wetland.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you.
So
Thank you. I think we have a motion.
I think the motion is our support to the Board of Supervisors to proceed as indicated in Mr. Hosbach's report.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Darren, you're on mute.
Whoop, Darren, you're on.
Just gabbled, so.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had trouble hearing the motion, Ed. Could you just repeat it for me?
It's a motion to express our support and recommendation to proceed with, for the township manager to proceed as indicated in Mr. Hosbach's report with tree
Have bid.
removal.
To go to bid.
All right, thank you. I'll add my aye to that.
Yeah.
I want to extend an offer if you guys would like to meet one evening on site to walk through and look at these objectives. I'd be happy to spend as much time as needed to really walk you through it.
Thank you.
Let you understand the ecological piece.
Thank you.
So,
Approved. Motion approved.
thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
The next on our agenda is 14 Marple Lane, which is up for subdivision and sale of property. And I think we have appraisals, right?
Yep, we have the appraisal that was in the packet. As you see, they went out there, took a look at it. They had the former appraisals with them. I provided that to them prior to them going out. They looked at the site. As was said before, it's a single-family home with a detached garage on it. I'll try to get to this pictures so everyone sees it. The appraised value came back at $200,000, and in the report, it states that if we were to put a facade easement on the front of the house, it would be reduced by 25%. The appraiser did not see any real use of putting a facade easement on it. She said it usually would be in a neighborhood that everything else is in, a historic site, and they were keeping with the look of the neighborhood. She did not find that on this street.
Craig, approximately how many acres are going to be with this house? Do you know?
It's about a half acre, about 0.4.
So it's a half acre, 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house, low ceiling. I think this is actually a very generous appraisal for what this looks like in the photos.
Yeah, the former two were like about half of what she came back with.
She was the high number appraisal?
She was.
Wow.
Were there other, do we get 2 other appraisals?
Back in, I think it was, I'm going to say 16 and 18, somewhere in that range.
She's from Sellersville, so a little further out. I think.
She lives in Whitemarsh, I found out.
No way.
Yeah.
But this would be reduced by 25%,
If
or
we
is the
put-
200
If we put the
with,
Yes, if there was a facade easement on it, she said, in the report, it shows that it was a reduction of 25% she would put on it. Because you have to care for the facade easement, if someone was to come down and tear it off the back and rebuild, they still need the facade easement. It's a little cumbersome, and $50,000, she said, is roughly what it would cost to take care of that facade easement. I did speak with the tenant. There was some comments at the workshop meeting that he had vacated the property. He did not know where that came from and was a little perturbed that I called him to ask him if he's still in the property. But he is, and still paying rent. And I didn't ask him again, but the prior conversation I had with him, he was interested in the property.
All right. So we have an appraisal at 200 grand for the house. At the last meeting, I was in favor of marketing the house and selling it. I remain in favor of doing that. I think that, creating a fund to be able to be used for how we conscientiously plan for this site is a good thing. The open space money is helpful for the land, but I think creating a fund that we're not tapping into the general fund to be able to do planning, property condition reports, things like that should be done to be good stewards of the property. This is the first step, and that's my 2 cents.
Darren, Dina?
Yeah, Ed, I agree with you. I think this is a gift to this project, and we should leverage it the best way we can.
I'm in agreement as well that the money could be used for Abolition Hall itself.
Do we have any public comments? Yes.
Sidel Zove. A couple of questions. The fact that Marple Lane in the area that abuts this house is private, not public, does that have an impact on the appraisal? I didn't see any reference to that in the appraisal. I read it closely, including the narrative section that follows the sort of the form section. I didn't see any reference
I
to
didn't see any reference to
So
that.
Sidel, if you look at the site on this page that's showing, it says location, average, view, residential. So I think they're looking at this and appraising it as a residential property.
Yeah, I realize that, but what I'm saying is that the road from Germantown Pike, most of it is private. It is not a public road. And I'm asking whether the fact that it is a private road where, with all of the parcels,
They share.
yeah, the parcels, based on my review of the tax maps, the parcel lines go out to the middle of the road on both sides. So
It's a common drive.
right. So the fact that it is not public and it is unimproved, I mean, it is in pretty bad shape. I didn't see any reference to that in the appraisal, and I'm wondering if that has any impact on the value, but apparently
Do
not.
you think the number's high?
Well, she included comparables, and she adjusted for, as they do in the appraisal, she adjusted for various factors, condition, location, so forth. So I'm assuming that it's on target. I don't know. So that was one question, and apparently she was not aware of the fact that that's a private road, and because it's not mentioned in the appraisal?
My guess is it
I
doesn't.
think I discussed with her that it was a private road. She didn't, I don't know if she knew or not, but she did say there was a lot of eyes on her when she drove down the street. I did speak to her. I know it's not on any report or anything about making this a public access, and she did not agree with that. It's not in her report, and it's me saying that she didn't
Okay,
agree with it.
that's
but
fine.
I don't have anything more than that. but,
Okay. My next question is there a way under the Act 155 Open Space Fund Enabling Legislation, 153, is there a way for the township to place an easement on this property using open space funds? So an easement that would cost $200,000, the fair market value of the property, and basically reimburse itself, take open space dollars, put it into the general fund instead of marketing this property. And the reason I ask that, two reasons. Before I even saw the Montgomery County Planning Commission review of the subdivision plan, it had occurred to me that this parcel is really a back door to the homestead. It's a back door that provides access for a very densely populated residential neighborhood. All those little cul-de-sacs that terminate around Marple Lane. It's an important access point for the community to this homestead, one that doesn't require walking along busy Butler Pike. And then I saw the April 28th Montgomery County Planning Commission review letter, which was not in the packet that went out with this agenda, but
That went to the Planning Commission.
right. So it's
That was the subdivision plan for the Planning Commission.
right, and that's where I found it.
Right.
In
And
the,
that's where it should be.
I think that's where I found it. Anyway, I have the letter in front of me, and this is written by Barry Jeffries, who is the senior design planner, and he reviews all of Whitemarsh Township's subdivision and land development plans. And he indicates that the Planning Commission is generally in favor of the subdivision plan for this property. He says, given the national and regional significance of both Abolition Hall, Hovenden House, and the township's stated goal of creating open space connections, we believe that the future public access to this Abolition Hall site from Marple Lane should be secured with a public access easement in the sale of the property. And then he goes on to write, we recommend that a public access easement area, 15 to 20 feet wide, be established along the southern boundary of 14 Marple Lane with the sale of this property. Southern boundary being the long side that faces Germantown Pike.
So along the left-hand side of the building?
As you're facing the building along the left-hand side, going all the way back into the fields. So 2 points. You have the Montgomery County Planning Commission recommending an easement to provide that public access. And then I have a question, and that is whether the township could tap the open space fund to, in a sense, reimburse itself to the tune of $200,000, which would then go into a reserve for improvement of the buildings, and forever secure this property. And, you know, the facade easement that was referenced in the appraisal refers to the front wall only, right? Not the building.
May I challenge you on something?
Sure.
Let's
have a debate. Let's have a discussion.
What about the maintenance and upkeep of the property?
So that's where I was going with this reference to the facade easement. The appraisal notes the poor condition of the property. The inspection reports that were done for the due diligence prior to the township acquiring the property note its poor condition. Believe it or not, although I am pro-preservation and have attend most of the HARB meetings, I would not object to this building coming down because of its condition. And we have documentation of that condition in multiple places. I don't want the township to be burdened with maintenance of yet another old building that was not well maintained over the years, as evidenced by what Roy Wilson said at this committee.
Excuse me, don't use my name.
Anyway, we know the condition is not great. We know that the property hasn't been well maintained, and we certainly don't want to burden the township with yet another building to maintain over time. So just as the township acquired the Hall parcel and demolished the building there, albeit a much more recent vintage building, I would recommend in this instance, or at least would like to discuss in further detail, the possibility that the township can use open space funds to acquire an easement on this property in perpetuity and tap open space funds to pay for the demolition.
Got it. Let me ask a couple questions. Thank
Yeah.
you. Craig, Montgomery County Planning is working on cross-county trail stuff.
Yes.
Are you privy to those discussions?
Yes.
Okay, is this lot in play as part of that?
No.
Marple Lane is are there other neighborhoods that connect to Marple Lane besides through Germantown Avenue?
Through the back, there's a sewer easement that goes out to, I don't know what the name of the,
Is that part of the Cross County Trail's future stuff?
yes, the Cross County Trail will go further down Marple Lane and then down through the sewer easement.
Okay. So, based on your discussions, do you find that this property, it plays a critical or integral role in future connectivity?
I don't. I think putting an easement on this property on a private drive may get the residents there very upset that we're telling people to walk through this area.
That was my initial first blush, was actually
Mine too.
concern about kids, like, going and loitering through there, and
Yeah,
that was...
opening it up, like, as you mentioned, it is a private drive, it doesn't have open access, and this would be welcoming public. I think the neighbors would be concerned.
Reasonable concern. Okay.
And will there be access to Abolition Hall from the Cross County Trail in another location?
I would think Butler or Pike further down.
Butler Pike, there won't be a trail unless we install one.
Yeah.
We don't know what the future is for our site, but we could put a trail in to connect to the Cross County Trail, which would bring it up to Germantown Pike, which I think would be good, but
Yeah.
that's just my opinion.
And, I think the point that Sidell raises is there's merit to it, and one thing that we could do is to stop the hemorrhaging of it, we could tear the house down and then just have a bare piece of land, because quite frankly, the value is really in the land. $200,000 buildable lot in Whitemarsh Township, there's value there too. Thank you for your comment.
I have one other comment. So this is the Army Corps of Engineers wetland delineation map, a very large scale. And I just want to point out that the largest of the wetlands here, this wetland, flows into the rear of what will be this lot, this half-acre lot.
Yeah, I see it.
So the lot line, as I understand, just comes straight across, follows
Right.
this.
Yeah.
So there's a piece of the largest wetland that will lie within essentially the backyard.
Can I see this for a second?
The backyard of this subdivision. And I'm concerned about the fate of that corner of the wetland. And we heard John Hosbach say that there would be a 100-foot buffer around the wetlands so that they would be protected from any machinery and so forth. And I don't know that, obviously 100 feet, if you protected that little corner by 100 feet, you couldn't do anything on this parcel.
Well, people can have wetlands on their property, and it can go from ownership by the township to an ownership by private,
Sure.
and they're still regulated the same.
Well, my concern is that the wetland be identified up front, and that a notation, in some form of notation, maybe an easement, I'm not quite sure what, but that the township make clear that it is aware of the presence of the wetland and that it cannot be disturbed.
I had Gilmore go out there while we were doing the appraisal and mark out the wetlands, so it would be on the subdivision plan.
I see
Okay.
it also as a point of maybe disclosure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In a future sale. Looking at this map, I live on a private lane, and there's 6 homes that are sort of across from one another on this, and then a few more homes that are in the back. I think inviting public access when we have main access is it's a tough thing to tell someone who's lived in a quiet, private way.
Fair enough.
Security.
Yep, I can appreciate that thoroughly, but still, there's the opportunity to retain this piece of land, whether it's made into an access way or not. I think for $200,000 plus potentially the cost of demolition, the township could hold on to this half-acre parcel.
Well, the challenge, I'm not the solicitor, but the township's open space money was used to acquire the open space land upon which this house
included
sits.
this, right.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it gets in illegal, in which
And so like,
above.
Actually, the solicitor publicly stated, because I asked about this in one of the meetings, what the status is of the Marple Lane house, and he said that, along with the other historic structures, were acquired with the Karabat's donation.
okay, it was carved out.
Yeah,
Okay.
the minutes reflect that.
I thought it was, I thought your idea was very good. And I would love to say that I support bringing this connection through here. This neighborhood looks really quiet and sleepy and private. And as someone who's here to make recommendations for the good of everyone, I don't want to ruin their tranquility.
I fully appreciate that, but the underlying premise is that I'm proposing is that the township could retain the land just because it's an important piece of the parcel. Anyway, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Consideration.
Yes.
Roy Wilson again. I strongly suggest you should sell the property. Let somebody buy it. Let them decide if they want to tear it down or not. Having lived there for 40 years, and I at one time knew probably everybody on that lane, I don't now, but you can't really tell somebody you can put an access. The township does not pave the road. They don't really do anything. They do pick up the trash, to their credit. But I mean, if you got to fix the road, the tenants have, the landowners have to do it. And to just come in and say, okay, now we're going to make this private access down your little street, who we haven't really paid any attention to all these decades, you're never going to get approval on that. You're going to have to get all those, and if they all want to sign off and say, that's great, we want to see these people come down the street, I think that's terrific, great, but they're not going to.
Well, and also, the township's doing a really nice job with the county providing interconnectivity in ways that don't cut through people's backyards.
Right.
Right? Like, there's a balance. There's a balance to it.
And I guess lastly, the thing I'm getting a little upset about, listen to all this, you know, these buildings are rotting away over there that you guys bought. Abolition Hall, the barn, and the Hovenden House. Buildings are just sitting there vacant now for years and years. Buildings don't do well when they're abandoned. This piece of property has no value. That money needs to go into, you know, working on these buildings. That needs to be done now.
The only thing I will say is, I fixed up a mill that had been sitting for 30 years.
I agree with you.
And they do come back. And this will come back, okay? One day, this thing will be something we are all proud of, and we'll remember sitting here in this room working on it. We just have to get these things step by step by step, and I think we're doing that.
Yep.
So
I want to
that
say
end,
maintenance fund. I want somebody to mow the grass. I want some of this general maintenance painting stuff to get done now. This is an opportunity to get a block of money to do that with. And really, it belongs, that block of land belongs to Marple Lane.
Thank you.
They need another neighbor living in there that coexists with the other neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Darren, do you have any other comments?
No, I think this is a good conversation. I like where we're headed.
Sounds good. Please do.
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the house be marketed and sold ASAP. It's a good time of year to do so.
And we did, just to note, we did make a recommendation to the board to do the appraisal at our
Yes.
last meeting, which has been done. So this is.
Correct. Yeah, so the first step would be the subdivision, and it's going to go to the Planning Commission this month or next. The Planning Commission was canceled tomorrow. Yeah, well, But
I second Ed's motion.
And by the way,
that'll be the first step is the subdivision, and then
I'm really impressed with the way the township staff, supervisor, everything keeps moving. We show up here 2 months later sometimes, and
Things are still happening.
we're met with
Yeah.
really nice results on where this is going. So thank you for all your work behind the scenes.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries. There you go.
All right, what else do we have?
So the public engagement process, which is what we're doing right now, but also talking briefly about the survey results, which are still coming in and not fully assembled in a way that we can clearly disseminate all the information, but we do have a little bit that was in the packet to share, so.
correct. The open-ended questions, how it
Is it
comes
closed-
in.
Closed now? Is the
It's all
survey
closed, yeah,
Yep,
the,
okay. And how many total replies do we get?
254. Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So, but the open-ended questions, how it comes off of SurveyMonkey, it's all in a big Excel sheet with 254
Yeah.
responses to all the questions, and some questions were skipped, and it's cumbersome. So I'm hoping to have something maybe by next week that I could get out to everyone.
Thank you.
But I don't know if you want to go through these questions.
I don't know, like, does anybody, yeah, I think it might be better to wait, but I do want, like, to your point earlier, Ed, where you just said how things are happening, I wanted to make sure that people knew, we said there'd be a survey, we did do it, data is coming in, it just hasn't been assimilated yet, yeah.
We have 15 more minutes or something that I would like to talk about is, we did a wonderful, I say we, Craig and his staff did a wonderful job getting this tree report completed and to us. To that end, I think that we should go after a property condition report. You know, something that we can start to understand what's happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah. Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense to me, yeah.
Okay. You know,
So we want an outside consultant for that, though.
well, you know, we have the woman in the room today who was involved with this project from the beginning. That would be my preference because of the continuity of it. We did this at the Highlands. The first thing we did was we did a property condition report where someone with historic architecture experience comes in and looks at the property as a whole and tells you what's there, what's flat, you know, what trees need to be removed immediately, and takes pictures and documents it and helps guide decision-making. So, you know, I think that we should talk to Claire and her team about that. And maybe at the next meeting, you know, we can discuss that, put it on the agenda. Is that something that seems reasonable?
I think it does. We can work on that.
Yes, I agree.
Darren, is that cool with you?
Yes.
Thank you.
And as far as our next meeting, we are set for June 30th at 7 PM.
7 PM, yes.
All right.
Very good. Any other comments or questions?
Sidel Zove. I am pleased that Claire, the architect, has shown up at some of these meetings, maybe all, not quite sure. And if I recall correctly, Craig, you reported at some point that in conjunction with the Art Center being released from the ownership of this property, the township had to reimburse the Art Center for its out-of-pocket, which I think was primarily architectural fees.
Most of it was the fees.
Yeah, and
The expenses that
the
occurred.
number I remember was around $30,000.
I think you're right, yeah.
Somewhere in that neighborhood.
ballpark.
So my question is, clearly, the architect was involved, very intimately involved with the Art Center in trying to figure out how to improve the buildings and a vision for the future. So isn't it the case that a lot of the condition assessment is already completed and the township has access to that information?
So I think there's two things, right? I looked at some of the documents that the Arts Center had prepared, and the Arts Center was gearing its tasking towards objectives it was trying to achieve.
Right,
It was looking at spaces in a way of feasibility.
right.
What I'm talking about, and what the Highlands did, is you have an architect come in with no agenda and just tell us how these buildings are, and tell us the conditions, and tell us the issues, and
Prepare a
identify.
structural report.
Right, so that was not done as part of
That was
the
not
due
done.
diligence for the
But
Arts Center?
I
Okay,
do really like Ms. DiDonato for it because of the time she's familiar
Right.
with the building.
Right.
To me, that we've already acquired intellectual property that she's done for the Arts Center. There's a continuity. And I think that we should discuss that at the next meeting, and hopefully we'll have your support on that.
so will you be asking her to prepare a proposal?
We don't ask anything. We just make recommendations.
Yeah.
If the recommendation is that maybe this can get put on the agenda for the next meeting, we're just advising.
The agenda would be to ask her for a proposal for her assistance with the township.
So is there a motion coming out tonight to do that, that would go to the Board of Supervisors, or?
I
No.
don't know how.
Not yet.
I don't know how that works. It was
No.
not my intention to, but
No, we
do you
would,
think that should happen that way?
I think we need to move as quickly as possible because, years have gone by and we have nothing to show for it, right? And I think it's imperative that we keep this thing moving forward as quickly as possible. Quickly, but in an orderly fashion that meets the requirements of transparency and accountability.
How about a middle ground that?
It may not look that way, and there are a lot of things happening at one time, and there will be things coming out momentarily that will make things more clear. So I would caution you to hold on tight.
Okay.
And know that we are moving forward as quickly as we can, and it needs to go through the proper channels.
Okay.
But that we are continuing to move forward as quickly as we can, judiciously.
Right.
With great recommendations and great research, and making sure the board is aware. Again, the perfect example is John coming to the workshop.
Right.
Making sure that went through the proper channels, came here. There's just a lot of moving parts at one time right now.
Okay.
Maybe just for clarity, maybe if it's okay with you, Laura, the recommendation is that we recommend the Board of Supervisors request a proposal that maybe we could review at the next meeting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the scope of what, because we have to look at what we have already with what a consultant could do.
yeah, I like that
I don't know that
recommendation.
needs to be a formal
You like that
recommendation.
recommendation?
I like that recommendation better because I don't have it on the agenda. I'm a little bit worried that
Yeah.
we can't amend the agenda right now. We need the
No,
24 hours.
it wasn't my intention to.
And, yeah, without it being on the agenda, I wouldn't want a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. I want a recommendation for an outside consultant to provide a proposal.
Yeah, it's not formal, it's not,
Right.
yeah, I mean, we're not
Yeah.
a judicial.
Right, it's a recommendatory board, so.
Good. And in the meantime, is it possible to get the privet hedge clipped along Butler Pike? It looks terrible.
We did address that at the last meeting,
It's-
that was going to be something taken care
Yeah.
of along Butler Pike.
Let's bootstrap it to a tree contract, privet hedge.
Well, that we can do in-house. We did cut it away from the building. It was, I can put it on the list. How about that?
Thank you, because it's probably about 20 feet tall at this point.
Thanks, Dale.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Good night,
Aye.
Whitemarsh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, Darren. Safe travels.
Bye, Darren.
Thank you. Take care.